across the fence, it's our monthly Bird Notes program. We'll see and hear about the best of the bird feeders. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. As always, on the fourth Wednesday of the month, I'm joined by Mark LaBarr, conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont. Great to see you again.
Always great to be here.
Can't believe it's this time of year already.
It certainly is. It's fast approaching. It's fast approaching. And of course, as we do every year, bird feeding is a it's a great thing. It's a great introduction to the bird world. I want to thank Guy's Farm and Yard for supplying us, letting us borrow the bird feeders from over their shop in Williston. And if you go over there and you do purchase something from them, you can stick it in the bluebird house there, and some of those proceeds go back to the Nature Center, the Audubon Nature Center in Huntington. So
great.
Yeah, they've been great supporters of us.
Good. Where do you want to start?
Well, we think about bird feeding, and we kind of go over some of the basic principles every year when we do this show, but it's really good to kind of just talk about the different feeders and then talk about some of the newer things that have kind of come online. And so we'll start with the feeders and talk a little bit about that. I think the first feeder, what we call the hopper feeder, which is the traditional bird feeder. It's one that fills from the top. It's got the nice clear plastic sides that allows you to see how much food you have in there.
Always handy.
Always handy. The perches are big enough for a number of different birds, and on this particular model,
Suet.
It's got suet. It's got a place for the suet on either side. So a great all-around feeder, a good starting feeder. Oftentimes you can find places that folks will make them at home, or you can find people that make them for you, but a great feeder design.
And it's okay, the birds don't mind eating seeds while someone else is doing suet?
Nope, they'll be able to, depending on the species, you can have woodpeckers and chickadees using that same thing at the same time. You might not get some of the bigger birds, some like cardinals and stuff. The perch might be a little bit shallow on this one, but they do come in all different sizes, so you can accommodate them. Another really good feeder system is the tube system, which we talk about. And this year, we have two different styles. The one there in your right hand, which is your classic feeder. And the nice thing about the tube feeder is they're easy to fill. They're easy to see. And oftentimes, a lot of them, including this one, has a base that comes off, so they're easy to clean.
Because that's the seed always gets, the thistle gets down here and it kind of rots and gets wet.
And in this particular version, if you tilt it, you can see this one actually has two different perches on it. So they're coming in with a perch that's a little bit closer, so some of the smaller birds can access that, and then a perch that sticks out a little bit further for some of the larger birds.
Right, very handy.
Yeah, so a lot of the old tube feeders just had that one perch system, so this is a newer one. Some of the bigger ones just couldn't get at it. Again, the tube feeder is it's great just because you can take that whole feeder and dip it right in that we say that 4-to-1 bleach solution when you're cleaning your feeders. The wooden feeder, a little bit more difficult to clean, that hopper feeder, just because it's got a lot of corners and nooks and crannies. The other tube feeder that we have here, this is a thistle feeder. Now in the past, and we'll show you the thistle in a little bit. In the past, the thistle feeders I brought in have been feeders very similar to the tube feeder, only it has a very small hole in it. And this particular one is one that actually has, it's like a grill almost. And so that allows birds to grab onto the side, and they can feed from all different areas. So I'd be kind of curious to see how this one works compared to some of the other ones that tend to have perches that allow the birds to sit on it. But a good way to bring in your goldfinches. If it's an eruptive year and we get some of our northern species, some red poles, those are the species pine siskins will feed at this kind of feeder. So great for that suite that comes in and likes that smaller seed.
And again, can accommodate lots of different birds at once.
Exactly. The next thing that we've looked at, and a couple that we've brought, you mentioned the Suet baskets on the side of the first feeder. We have another Suet feeder, and this one came out, or I saw it for the first time last year. This is a Suet feeder. You put the suet in the top, but it has that extended tail on the bottom, and so that's great for woodpeckers.
So they can grab on.
They can grab on, and they can use their tail, which is a very stiff tail that they use for feeding on trees, and they can use that to prop themselves up to access the suet.
Yeah.
So it gives, things like chickadees and nuthatches, it's not that important, but for the woodpeckers, it's a great thing for them to have to support themselves.
Okay.
And then the other Suet feeder, which is a little bit further out front, this is one that is an upside down feeder. And this is supposed to keep some of the birds like starlings and things like that that have a tougher time gripping onto that grill and hanging upside down to keep them off of the suet, so that
nuthatches and chickadees would love it.
They all have that ability to hang upside down, including woodpeckers. So it's a feeder that hopefully selects for some of those species as opposed to things like starlings.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, so, and suet's a great addition to your feeder system. Your hopper feeder is going to bring in your chickadees, a whole bunch of different birds. You've got your Thistle Feeder, which is going to bring in, as I said, your goldfinches. And now you add another layer by bringing in that suet, and you bring in your woodpeckers and your nuthatches and things that like that high energy fat.
Right.
Now, this is a new feeder that I found this year.
I don't know why. I just love it.
It is kind of interesting because it's kind of a big spring. This is a feeder that's designed for whole peanuts.
Okay.
Okay, so peanuts in the shell. I don't think peanuts that were not in the shell would stay in there.
Right.
But it allows birds, again, like woodpeckers, jays, and the like, to be able to get in there, and they can access those peanuts by pulling them through that little spring system.
Yeah. That's
so, I'd be curious on this one. I haven't seen it in action. I'd be curious how much waste it might be and how much work it might be for the birds, how much of that stuff. But I think if you stick with the whole peanuts, you're in pretty good shape.
In the shell.
In the shell.
Yeah.
Okay. I would think other peanuts would fall right through that.
Absolutely.
And then as we move down and we start looking at other feeders, this is a big open platform feeder. It's got holes in the bottom, as you saw there, so it allows some of the liquid, any kind of rain that gets in there. This is a great feeder for your jays, your cardinals, that can't use some of the smaller perches on some of the other feeders. And they can access the seed underneath. It has a nice dome on the top, which protects the seed from getting too wet, and also potentially, maybe keeps some of the squirrels out, depending on how you do it. And then the last feeder, and this one, again, might be something you might be interested in, is our, and this is new that I found over at Guy's Farm and Yard, this is a mealworm feeder. And so mealworm is great. They're great for bluebirds. You said your birds came back just a little bit ago.
Yep, 4 of them.
And I've heard that from other folks coming in inspecting their bluebird houses before winter sets in. But this is a domed system, and it has a wire mesh bottom. So again, that allows the mealworms to kind of stay dry and not get damp and soggy. And
which is good, because it's fairly expensive to buy in the mealworms, and you want to make sure they last as long as they can.
Correct. And that's it's an insect, so it's a high energy, high fat kind of feed for the birds, and a great. I assume it's a great feeder. We'd have to hear if folks do purchase this. I'd love to hear back. Any of the feeders, feel free to report in, and I can always update.
Give you a review.
That's right. That's right. So a number of different feeders. We talk a little bit about, and we'll talk a little bit about squirrels, which we always do. But one feeder that we have that kind of, and we've talked about this in the past. This is a feeder that works on kind of the same principle. We've had hopper feeders in here before, but this is a feeder that you can adjust the tension of a spring in here, And so if you have bigger birds or you have squirrels that come onto this feeder, the weight of the squirrel will drop down and will close the feeder port. So that's a nice design. Supposedly this one won the Best New Product Award, you know, forever trying to outwit the squirrels. And this one actually even has a design where you can extend the perches.
Oh, wow, look at that.
So you can actually make it large enough for some of the larger birds and find that weight sensor that might let cardinals feed here, but not necessarily squirrels.
Great.
So there you go. Another feeder type that we can use. Again, to bring everything in. Oftentimes there's platform feeders. Some people, there'll be stuff that's on the ground, so birds will feed on that as well.
And turkeys.
And turkeys, lots of turkeys. So let's quick shift over to the food.
Okay.
You know, the food of choice that we feed at the Audubon and a lot of folks feed with is sunflower seeds.
Black oil sunflower
especially
seeds.
Black oil sunflower seeds. They're a little more expensive, but they are a high fat seed. As I mentioned, and birds do love them. Another seed that I mentioned, and this is the Niger seed or the thistle seed. And this is that really fine seed that we would feed in that one feeder. Again, a favorite of our goldfinches and siskins and the like. And then, of course, you know, when you're talking mealworms now, so they have a number of different products out there where you can actually purchase mealworms for those feeders. This particular feeder comes with a starter pouch of mealworms, so you can get started on them. But again, if you have bluebirds and you're living in an area that they may stick around during the winter, or even to put up late winter when they're first coming back, you can now get all sorts of food for them as well. We shift over to some of the other food types. This one here is our, you can see here on the side, it's a lot of peanuts. A lot of nuts. That's great for, again, the woodpeckers, you know, your nuthatches and things of that nature. They really like that larger seed. And there are feeders specific for this. It's kind of it's not as big as that spring feeder, so it holds that seed in and allows the birds to access them. And then, of course, our Suet Packs, which are suet, and they come with, nowadays,
just about everything.
Everything they put in there.
Fruits and nuts.
Yep, and these are great, and they fit in. It's kind of a standard model that fits in all of the different suet feeders.
And I like to freeze them first because it makes it easier to handle them. You don't get, you know, quite the mess on your hands.
We keep them in the freezer too. Yeah, if they tend not to melt, but if you do keep them in a warm place when you're putting them out, you tend up with a little bit of a slick. And then, of course, as always, you know, we talk about our squirrels.
Yes.
And squirrels are out there. They like to eat our.
They're hungry too.
They're hungry too, and many people like to feed them. You know, so it's not a bad way to go about it. I found this interesting device here. If you like to feed your squirrels, and you would like a little show at the same time, you basically put one of these blocks or part of a block onto this thing, and this is a little trapeze, so you get to have some entertainment as the squirrels.
Instead of 4 or 5 around.
That's right. So they get to
circus.
jump around, and you can have a squirrel circus out there. So that's a great new thing that I've seen. And then, of course, to keep squirrels out, there's a number of different things. Baffles that you would put on a pole that don't allow the squirrels to come up around.
Right.
To
it
do
has
that.
to be wide enough so they can't reach.
Right. And some people will put their bird feeders on a rope, and then on either side they'll put some PVC pipe. So as the squirrels walk down the rope, they hit that PVC and they spin. And then the last thing, of course, you can always have a big feeder like this, where you hook your feeder on up here, you stick it in the ground, and you set that away from any place that squirrels can launch themselves in order to get at the feeders.
Thanks, Mark. If you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark. You can write to him at Audubon, Vermont. The address is 255 Sherman Hollow Road, Huntington, Vermont, 05462. You can also contact Mark through email. His address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Send Mark your questions, and he'll try to find the answers in an upcoming edition of Bird Notes, and also to feeder reviews.
Yeah, feel free to send that stuff in. And again, thanks to Guy's Farm and Yard for letting us use all this stuff.
Terrific. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.